Hi, this is Brian Bieron with PlatformEconomyInsights.com, and this is an end of the year briefing, part of a series that we're doing, wrapping up some of the big digital platform economy public policy issues around the world. So today's briefing is on what's going on in Japan. Now, Japan is a really interesting digital platform economy example because it's, first of all, a really big e-commerce market. It's the fourth largest in the world. Secondly, it's a place where you don't just have the largest American digital platform businesses, the Googles and the Amazons and the Facebooks, Apple, operating as major players, but you also have some really big domestic, headquartered in Japan businesses in the digital platform sector. So in particular in Japan, two of the really big platforms are run by Rakuten, which is a huge e-commerce marketplace in Japan, as well as Yahoo Japan, which despite the name is not operated by the US Yahoo business, which by the way is now obviously owned mostly by Verizon, but instead is a large digital platform business that is owned by SoftBank, the Japanese business. So you have a market that is not just big and mature, but it is a place where large U.S. platform businesses as well as domestic businesses are major players. So a lot of news this year has been coming out of Japan, and in fact, much of it is really wrapping up as we enter the holiday season, the end of the year. So a quick check off of what these things are so that you can actually go back if you want. In fact, I think you should go to PlatformEconomyInsights.com on the web. You can find updates in the news and insights section on all of these topics to learn more, to click through and read more. But really quickly, the big news is the following. First, the Japan Fair Trade Commission, the JFTC, recently released two sets of guidelines for companies in the digital space. The first is a set of digital platform merger guidelines, which outline new thinking by the JFTC on the definition of digital platforms, as well as new considerations, new thinking when digital platforms, especially large digital platforms, are looking to acquire, in most cases, smaller digital platform players, issues related to the role of data in their thinking about dominance. Secondly, they released new guidelines regarding the concept of abuse of a superior bargaining position in the context of the Japan Anti-Monopoly Act. So this is new thinking in the competition space related to the largest digital platforms and how the JFTC is going to be thinking about data-related practices in the context of the largest platforms and their relationship with users, especially small and medium-sized businesses. Now, this is less straight on sort of consumer privacy guidelines. This is much more, I think, best thought of in the context of platform to business relations and how the terms and conditions and data practices of the largest platforms are going to be thought about by the JFTC in the context of competition law. Now, the JFTC has been spending time this entire year in this digital space, not just formulating these two new sets of guidelines, the set on mergers and on the concept of the abuse of a superior bargaining position, but actually kicked off the year with a review of the three largest e-commerce platforms, Amazon, Rakuten, and Yahoo Japan. Now, back in the spring, Amazon actually reached a settlement with the JFTC related to some practices that the Japan Fair Trade Commission felt were highly questionable from a competition perspective. Now, two worth noting are the fact that Amazon agreed to eliminate a most favored nation, an MFN, basically price parity provision that actually is causing Amazon problems around the world because they have been practicing essentially price controls demanding that sellers on the Amazon platform do not offer lower prices on other platforms and sites on the internet, even if, for example, those other platforms or sites have lower, let's say, operating costs associated with them, lower fees and other costs. Amazon demands at least as low a price on Amazon. This is a contractual provision that we see Amazon offering to remove around the world, market by market, although there are increasingly charges that Amazon actually enforces this kind of price parity through other activities and behaviors and policies on their site. But they agreed to remove it. Secondly, Amazon had been using a buyer reward system in Japan where actually they were requiring the sellers on their site to fund those buyer rewards. So although Amazon was claiming to reward Amazon buyers, they were actually requiring sellers to fund the program. They agreed to scrap that as well. Now, much more recently, we're talking about October now, Rakuten proposed somewhat of a similar kind of formula for a new free shipping program to their buyers in Japan. And they essentially had announced that they were going to implement in 2020 a program where buyers in Japan who bought the US dollar equivalent of $36 of goods would receive free shipping on that purchase. Now, Rakuten then notified sellers that the seller would actually pay for the shipping. So it wasn't actually free shipping, because of course we know there's no such thing as free shipping. It costs money to ship things. Instead, it was a requirement that a seller provide the free shipping to buyers in a mandatory way. Many Rakuten sellers complained, including a group of sellers who, number one, proposed to create a union of Rakuten sellers, and that's going to be something very interesting to watch in 2020. But a group of sellers complained to the JFTC and asked them to investigate the program. And this week we learned that in fact Rakuten admitted that the JFTC told them that there was probably problems with their proposed free shipping program that required sellers to pay for the shipping. And therefore, it appears that Rakuten is taking their shipping plan back to the drawing board. Now, other things going on. We had in early fall, the Prime Minister of Japan, Prime Minister Abe, create what was called in their parlance, or at least the translation was, a digital policy headquarters, which appears to be a cabinet level working group. And by appears, I mean the term working group I'm using. But it's a cabinet level group within the Prime Minister's cabinet to focus on digital platform policy and legislation. And in fact, they've been meeting in the second half of the year with big digital platforms, both the domestic players and the US-based players. And I'm sure if there are other headquartered based non-Japanese businesses, they're getting brought into the process as well. But they are discussing new legislation for early 2020, which is going to focus on platform to business terms and conditions. So this is not all that dissimilar from what we just saw in terms of the JFTC's guidelines on abuse of a superior bargaining position, but those guidelines can go into effect without legislation. This is going to be further legislation that is going to look into platform data practices, platform terms and conditions for users with a focus again on small businesses, but also potentially some changes that I think would be best thought of in the privacy and data space. So we're looking forward to that from the Prime Minister's headquarters on digital platform policy. Finally, a couple other wrap-up pieces of news. One is that Yahoo Japan and an app called Line, L-I-N-E, which is the biggest messaging app in Japan. That Line app is owned by the business Naver, which is a Korean digital leader, literally the sort of equivalent of a Google in Korea. So it's a kind of a search-based, but now kind of digital conglomerate business in Korea. Line and Yahoo Japan are proposing to be merged. And as I mentioned earlier, remember, Yahoo Japan is owned by SoftBank. Now you have Line owned by Naver. The proposal is to merge the two together. This would combine one of the biggest e-commerce sites in Japan, that being Yahoo Japan, with one of the biggest, if not the biggest, messaging app, that being Line, in a new business that would be owned 50-50 by SoftBank and Naver. Number one, that's a big merger. Number two, it's going to be very interesting given all the work we've seen this year by the JFTC in the space of digital platforms, including new merger guidelines, how this merger is going to be received. It's also very interesting because you have one of the domestic Japanese large digital businesses that's engaging in a merger that is certain to be argued as offering them a better opportunity to compete with the large foreign-owned digital platforms. And that is one of the big questions in the context of digital platform merger issues, which is emerging around the world. We see Australia, Europe, the UK, the United States. We see real interest by those concerned about the largest platforms with changing merger and acquisition guidelines to address what some believe are real concerns. One of the big arguments to allow mergers is almost always allowing those companies to be more competitive, in many cases, to compete with the other largest platforms. We're going to see that play out in the Naver, Line, SoftBank, Yahoo Japan merger in Japan. And again, a great chance to see the new merger guidelines potentially in action as implemented by the JFTC. Lastly, I want to mention that the U.S.-Japan Digital Trade Agreement, which was part of a small set of trade agreements between the United States and Japan, it was approved by the Japanese Parliament, the Diet, at the end of the year, and actually will be able to go into effect from the United States side because it does not require, on the digital policy side, any changes in U.S. law. So that went into effect as well. It includes some Section 230 type civil liability provisions, which the U.S. internet industry strongly supports, and which has become somewhat controversial in the U.S. Congress and surrounding debate in the context of whether Section 230 in the United States, whether that law itself in its home jurisdiction is actually good policy going forward. Here at Platform Economy Insights, we spend some serious time thinking and talking about Section 230. So that's the wrap up on digital platform policy in Japan, a look back at 2019, and a bit of a look forward to 2020. It's going to be another big year and an important place to keep track of what's happening because we've got, again, a big market with both big US-based players, but also some big, robust domestic digital platform players as well. And that's one of the few places where that's actually the case. So thank you for clicking on this video briefing from platformeconomyinsights.com. I'm Brian Bieron. If you have any questions, there's a link below to link into the platformeconomyinsights.com website and ask a question. Looking forward to our next briefing. Bye-bye.